The Starglow rink had been the heartbeat of Miller's Grove for decades, its cracked parking lot filled with kids on Friday nights and couples on date nights. But that was years ago. Now, only a handful of skaters glided across the dull wooden floor under flickering lights. Eleanor Ellie Watkins sat at the snack bar, her skates unlaced and dangling from her shoulder. She was 17, working her third and final night shift before the rink closed for good. A sign on the front door announced it in crooked red letters. Closing August 14th, thank you for the memories. Mr. Peters, the owner, was hunched over the counter counting change. You're on cleanup duty tonight, Ellie. Just like last time, he said without looking up. Ellie sighed. You know there's no one to clean up after, right? Just humor me, Peters muttered. His voice carried the edge of a man who had once been proud of something and now wanted only to forget it. The rink lights dimmed for the glow skate session, bathing the room in eerie purples and greens. The music kicked in, an old disco track that warbled like it was coming from underwater. Four skaters circled slowly, their neon wheels leaving streaks of light. Ellie picked up her mop and bucket. The air felt wrong. Heavy. She noticed condensation gathering on the windows even though it wasn't humid outside. A loud thunk echoed from somewhere deep inside the rink. The skaters stopped, looking around. Peters froze. Stay here, he ordered, and walked toward the maintenance hallway. Ellie leaned on her mop, listening. The music stuttered, slowed, and finally cut out. In the silence, she heard something faint, a scraping sound, like metal skates on concrete, coming from somewhere below them. Ellie waited, gripping the mop handle like it could protect her from whatever was making that sound. The scraping came in slow, deliberate strokes, each one echoing as if it traveled through a hollow chamber. Mr. Peters disappeared through the double doors to the maintenance hallway. A faint light flickered in the narrow gap beneath them, then vanished. The skaters whispered nervously. One of them, a lanky guy with a sweatshirt tied around his waist, called over, "Hey, is it, like, safe in here?" Ellie forced a smile. Probably just the boiler or something. Happens all the time. It was a lie. She'd worked here 2 weeks and had never heard anything like it. The scraping stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the hum of the snack bar refrigerator. Then came another sound, a soft, wet thud. Peter's voice called out from the hallway. Ellie, come here a minute. It wasn't quite right. His tone was off, stretched, like someone imitating him but not getting the rhythm right. Her stomach tightened. I'll be right back, she told the skaters, setting the mop against the wall. She pushed through the double doors. The hallway beyond smelled damp, metallic. The overhead lights buzzed, casting shadows that swayed like they were moving in time with her heartbeat. Peters was nowhere in sight. She followed the sound of dripping water toward the utility room. The door stood open. A pale blue glow spilled out, too cold and bright to be from any light bulb she knew. Inside, the room was empty except for a metal hatch in the floor. It was open, revealing a dark shaft descending into shadow. The glow pulsed faintly from below, like it was breathing. Ellie knelt, peering down. The scraping sound started again, only louder now. And then, from somewhere in the dark, a pair of wheels rolled into view, rusted roller skates, slowly turning in place, with no feet inside them. A voice floated up the shaft, quiet and broken. Come skate with us. Ellie staggered back from the open hatch, her knees hitting the utility room floor with a hollow clack. The voice didn't echo like it should have, it was too close, like whoever spoke was right behind her ear. She whipped her head around. Nothing. Just the humming fluorescent light above, threatening to blink out. Peters, she called, louder than she meant to. Her voice bounced down the shaft, swallowed by the dark. The glow from below shifted, flickered, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw movement, a shadow gliding across the light, graceful, almost like someone skating. The scraping began again, but faster now, circling. She could hear the wheels grinding against concrete, the clack-clack of metal hitting uneven surfaces. And underneath it all, laughter. Childlike. Muffled. Something wet dripped onto her wrist. She looked up at the ceiling. A brownish red bead slid down from the light fixture and splashed against her skin. She jerked her arm back, heart pounding. The hatch creaked. Slowly, it began to close by itself, hinges groaning like a warning. Without thinking, Ellie grabbed the edge. The metal was cold, too cold, like it had been sitting in ice. From the other side of the room came a sound that made her freeze, the faint swish of skates on wood. She turned toward the hallway. Standing there was a girl, no older than 12, in a faded starglow staff shirt. Her hair was wet, dripping onto the floor. Her roller skates, old-fashioned, with tan leather boots, were leaving streaks of water in her path. Ellie swallowed hard. "Are you lost?" The girl tilted her head, smiling in a way that didn't touch her eyes. "We're all lost down here." Then she skated backward into the dark hallway, silent, smooth, and vanished around the corner without a sound. From below the hatch, the voice returned, overlapping with the girl's words in her head. "Come skate with us." Ellie's pulse pounded in her ears, each beat screaming at her to turn around, to run back to the safety of the snack bar. But her feet carried her toward the hatch instead, as if something below was pulling at her. She crouched beside the opening again. The pale blue glow was still pulsing faintly from the depths, and the scraping of skates grew louder with every heartbeat. "Mr. Peters," she tried again, but the name sounded thin and useless in her mouth. A metallic clatter echoed up the shaft, like someone had dropped a skate. Then came the sound of wheels rolling again, faster this time. They weren't alone down there. Against her better judgment, she grabbed the nearby maintenance ladder bolted to the wall of the shaft and began climbing down. Each rung was damp, leaving a slick residue on her hands. The air grew colder with every step, carrying a faint smell of mildew and something else. Something sharp, like rust and old blood. After about 15 feet, her shoes hit solid ground. She turned, squinting in the strange blue light. She wasn't in a basement. Not exactly. She was standing on the edge of another skating rink, one that stretched farther than she could see, swallowed by fog. The wood floor here was warped and buckled, the painted lines faded, but the walls were covered in bright, fresh murals that seemed to shimmer in the light. Shapes moved in the mist. Skaters, dozens of them, gliding in perfect circles. None of them spoke. None of them looked at her. Their movements were smooth and identical, like puppets. Ellie stepped forward. Her foot landed in a puddle, sending ripples across the warped floor. The sound made several skaters stop mid-glide. Slowly, in unison, they turned their heads toward her. Every face was pale, waterlogged, with milky eyes that reflected the rink's blue glow. Their mouths opened at the same time, releasing a low, warbling hum. The hum grew louder, vibrating in her bones. From the mist, the little girl she had seen upstairs emerged, skating backward toward Ellie with that same unblinking smile. "You came," the girl whispered. "Now you can't leave." Ellie stepped back, her heel scraping against the warped floor. The hum from the skaters deepened into something almost mechanical, like gears turning far underground. "I don't want to be here," Ellie said, her voice shaking. She turned toward the ladder, only it was gone. The wall where she had climbed down was now covered in smooth, unbroken paneling painted with smiling cartoon skaters. The little girl stopped a few feet away, her wheels gliding silently over the wood. "You'll learn to like it," she said softly. "Everyone does." The fog shifted, and Ellie saw the rink stretching impossibly far, the painted murals along the walls flickering like old film reels. In one mural, she thought she saw herself, mopping the upstairs rink, but her reflection in the paint turned its head and grinned at her. Ellie bolted. Her sneakers squealed on the damp wood as she ran toward what looked like an exit sign in the distance. But the faster she ran, the farther it seemed. The skaters began to move again, forming a slow, synchronized circle around her, their wheels clicking in rhythm like a metronome. She tried to push through them, but each time she reached for a gap, it closed, and another pale, bloated face drifted past. Their eyes never blinked. Somewhere above the clicking, she heard the faint strains of music, an old roller rink organ tune, warped and dragging, as if it was being played underwater. The melody wrapped around her head like a vice, making her vision swim. One of the skaters leaned close as they passed her, their lips barely moving. Round and round, forever. The little girl was suddenly beside her again, taking Ellie's hand with an icy grip. "Your turn to skate," she said. Ellie looked down. The sneakers on her feet were gone. In their place were a pair of heavy, leather roller skates, the laces already tied tight. The floor beneath her feet shifted, tilting slightly, as if the rink itself was urging her forward. The hum grew louder. The circle opened just enough for her to step inside. The skaters moved in a slow, hypnotic circle, and the space between them yawned open just enough for Ellie to step inside. The moment she crossed the invisible boundary, her legs began to move on their own. She tried to stop, to plant her skates, but the wheels rolled forward as if guided by a magnet beneath the floor. Her knees bent into a rhythm she didn't recognize, her arms swinging loosely at her sides. The circle of skaters closed around her again, and she was swept into their endless rotation. The music swelled, not from speakers, but from the walls themselves. Every note sent a vibration through the floor, up her legs, into her chest. It was inescapable. She looked at the skater in front of her. His head lolled slightly with each turn, water dripping steadily from his ear. When he glanced back at her, his mouth hung open, and she saw that his tongue had been split into jagged ribbons. Ellie's breath hitched. She tried to move toward the edge of the rink, but her skates resisted, dragging her back into formation. Every time she fought, the pull grew stronger, until her muscles ached. The little girl appeared 2 skaters ahead, moving backward with perfect balance, her wet hair swinging like a pendulum. "One lap," she said cheerfully. "That's all it takes." Ellie's heart raced. "One lap for what?" The girl didn't answer. The fog on the rink began to thicken, curling upward like smoke. Shapes moved within it, too tall, too thin to be human, skating faster than the others. The sound of their wheels was sharper, almost like claws scratching the floor. Ellie felt the pull intensify, her speed increasing against her will. The other skaters matched her pace, their pale faces blurring into streaks of gray and blue. Somewhere ahead, the circle bent unnaturally, curving into the fog until Ellie could no longer see where it ended. As she crossed what felt like the halfway point, she realized the walls of the rink had vanished. The circle was now moving along a narrow path suspended in blackness. The floorboards creaked under the weight of the skaters, and the air grew colder still. The girl's voice came again, faint but clear. "Halfway there. No turning back now." The circle pulled Ellie faster, the narrow path of warped boards groaning under the synchronized rhythm of dozens of skates. The blackness beyond the rink floor seemed to ripple like water, and once, just once, she thought she saw a pale hand reach up from it before vanishing again. She kept her eyes on the skater in front of her, focusing on the back of his soaked shirt to keep from panicking. Every so often he twitched, like something was pulling at him from beneath the floor. The music warped further, notes slurring, beats dropping out. Her ears popped, like she'd stepped into a pressurized room. Somewhere behind her, a skater let out a muffled cry before being yanked backward into the blackness with a splash. No one else reacted. Ellie tried to pull away again, forcing her skates toward the edge, but the moment she did, a stabbing cold surged through her legs, locking her joints until she straightened into the circle once more. The fog ahead began to thin. Shapes emerged, arches made of bent skate frames welded together, dripping with condensation. She realized this was the finish line the girl had spoken of. Beyond it, the floor seemed smoother, glistening with a thin layer of water that reflected the blue glow like glass. As she passed under the arch, her body jerked, and for a heartbeat she wasn't on the rink at all, she was underwater, surrounded by floating shapes with empty eyes and open mouths. Their hair swayed like seaweed. The sound of the music was replaced by a deep, thrumming pulse that rattled her skull. Then, just as quickly, she was back on the floor, gliding in formation again. but now something was different. Her hands felt heavy, her breathing shallow. She glanced down, her skin was pale and pruned, like she'd been submerged for hours. A voice whispered at her side. The skater next to her, a young man with skin so translucent she could see the veins beneath it, leaned in without moving his lips. "It's your rink now." Ahead, the little girl spun in place, smiling. "One lap. You belong to us." The circle began to slow, and Ellie saw the ladder again, only now it was far above, like the rink floor had sunk deeper into the dark. Ellie staggered as the circle slowed, her skates finally obeying her own movements. The other skaters drifted past like slow-moving shadows, their eyes fixed ahead, their mouths slightly open as if they were breathing something she couldn't see. She reached for her neck and froze, her skin was ice-cold to the touch, her pulse sluggish. When she exhaled, a fine mist poured from her lips, curling in the frigid air. The little girl was suddenly beside her again, still skating backward effortlessly. "Don't fight it," she said, almost kindly. "The first few minutes are the worst. Then it's easier to breathe." Ellie's chest tightened. She coughed, and a splash of cold water spilled from her mouth onto the floor. It soaked into the warped boards without leaving a trace. "What's happening to me?" Ellie gasped. The girl's smile never changed. "You're filling up." The air felt heavier now, thick and damp, as if she were inhaling fog. Her arms ached, her fingers stiffening like they'd been in ice water too long. Every movement came with a faint slosh from somewhere inside her. She skated toward the rink's edge again, desperate to get away from the circle. This time, none of the others blocked her path, but as soon as she touched the wall, it pulsed beneath her palm like living flesh, warm and wet. She jerked her hand back, and the wall shivered before settling into painted paneling again. In the distance, the music faltered and stopped entirely. For a long, awful moment, there was silence. Then came a slow tap-tap-tap, the unmistakable sound of a single skate rolling across the floor. The fog parted, revealing a figure unlike the others. It was tall, impossibly thin, its head crowned with a tangle of bent wheels and rusted metal. Its arms were too long, ending in jagged blade-like fingers that scraped against the floor as it moved. The skaters around Ellie immediately picked up speed, circling again. The girl leaned close and whispered, "That's the sweeper. If you can't keep up, it takes you off the floor." Ellie's knees trembled. She didn't know if she could even stand much longer, let alone skate fast enough to outrun something like that. The sweeper moved with deliberate, gliding strides, the wheels embedded in its crown spinning in slow, irregular clicks. Every step made the warped boards groan. The fog seemed to thin around it, revealing more of its impossible frame, its spine curved forward like it was forever leaning into a turn, its chest rising and falling in shallow, watery breaths. The other skaters increased their speed, forcing Ellie to match their pace. Her legs burned, but the weight in her chest made every inhale feel like she was pulling air through a clogged filter. The sweeper's head tilted, the wheels in its crown spinning faster. Ellie realized it was listening, its jagged fingers twitching each time her skates made the faintest squeak against the floor. "Don't fall," the little girl said as she passed Ellie in the circle. Her tone wasn't threatening, it was matter of fact, like gravity itself. "It smells the ones who fall." Ellie's knees buckled for a fraction of a second, and instantly the sweeper's head snapped toward her. It began to skate, not fast at first, but with a steady acceleration, each stride impossibly smooth. She pushed harder, the heavy skates pulling at her ankles. The other skaters didn't seem to care that she was being hunted. They just moved, circling endlessly, letting the gap between her and the sweeper narrow. The fog swallowed her peripheral vision. All she could hear was the rhythmic swish-click of the sweeper's wheels and the wet drag of its blades against the floor. Her muscles screamed, but something primal kept her moving. The rink seemed to tilt again, pulling her forward into a turn she didn't remember starting. The circle broke apart, skaters vanishing into the mist until it was just her and the sweeper. It lunged. One bladed hand slammed into the floor where her skate had been a second earlier, splintering wood. The impact sent vibrations up her legs, and she almost lost her balance. Then, ahead in the fog, she saw it, a faint blue glow that looked like another opening. It might be a way out, or just another trap. She didn't care. She aimed for it, praying her legs would hold. Ellie's skates slammed against the warped boards, each stride more desperate than the last. The sweeper's claws scraped behind her in a steady rhythm, never stumbling, never slowing. The blue glow grew brighter, cutting through the haze like moonlight on ice. It shimmered strangely, as though it were reflecting off water. Her breath rattled in her throat, and every exhale left a spray of droplets on her chin. The fog thinned just enough for her to see it, a massive archway, taller than any doorway she'd ever seen, made entirely of bent roller skate frames welded together. Their wheels spun lazily, even though no wind touched them. Beyond the arch lay a smooth, glassy surface stretching into darkness. Ellie didn't think, she just dove for it. The moment she crossed the arch, her wheels hit the glass-like floor and nearly flew out from under her. It wasn't wood at all, it was solid ice, perfectly clear, with dark shapes swirling far beneath its surface. Her reflection stared up at her from the frozen floor. At first it looked normal, but as she glided forward, it began moving out of sync, lagging just slightly behind. Then, without warning, it grinned, wide and sharp, and slammed its palms against the underside of the ice. Ellie skated faster, but her reflection followed, its mouth moving as if trying to speak through the barrier. The sound was faint, muffled, like someone screaming underwater. The sweeper stopped just outside the archway, its clawed hands resting on the frame. It didn't enter, just watched. The wheels in its crown slowed, and for a moment, Ellie thought it almost looked wary. The blue light ahead pulsed brighter, and she saw another figure waiting on the ice. It was Mr. Peters. His hair hung wet over his forehead, and his skin had the pale, wrinkled look of someone who'd been submerged for too long. "You shouldn't have come down here," he said softly, his voice echoing strangely. "But now that you have..." He skated backward, motioning for her to follow. "It's time to meet the one who runs the rink." Far beneath the ice, her reflection began pounding harder, cracks forming under its hands. Ellie hesitated at the edge of the arch, glancing back at the sweeper. It hadn't moved, but its milky eyes stayed locked on her. When she turned forward again, Peters was already halfway across the ice, gliding with eerie smoothness. Her legs trembled as she followed. The skates slid too easily, as if the ice itself wanted her to move. Beneath her, the dark shape swirled, sometimes slow, sometimes darting up toward the surface before sinking again. The cracks in her reflection had spread. Now its mouth was moving faster, forming words she couldn't quite hear. The ice groaned under each strike of its palms, a low, resonant sound that vibrated through her skates. Peters stopped near the center of the rink. The blue light here was brighter, rising from a jagged fissure in the ice. "She doesn't like to be kept waiting," he said without turning to face her. "She?" Ellie's voice was thin in the vast space. Before he could answer, the fissure widened with a sharp crack. Cold vapor poured out, and something began to rise from the dark water below. At first, Ellie thought it was just a woman. She had long black hair that clung wet to her face, and a faded sequined skating dress that shimmered faintly in the light. But her legs weren't legs at all, they were a tangled mass of skate wheels and bent metal, turning and clicking with every movement. Her eyes were pools of black, and when she smiled, it was too wide, stretching until the corners nearly reached her ears. "Welcome," the woman said, her voice layered, like two people speaking at once. "Another stray has found the floor." Peters bowed his head slightly. She finished the lap. The woman's smile deepened. "Then she belongs." Ellie stepped back, her skates squealing against the ice. "I don't belong to anyone." The woman glided closer, and with each movement, the wheels beneath her shifted and clicked in perfect rhythm. "All who skate here belong to me," she said. "The rink takes what it wants." Beneath the ice, Ellie's reflection slammed its fists again, only now, its eyes had turned the same black as the woman's. The woman circled Ellie slowly, the faint hiss of her wheels cutting through the cold air. The ice beneath them groaned like something deep inside it was shifting. "You don't think you belong," the woman said, her voice rippling unnaturally, "but the floor decides. It always decides." "I don't want to be here," Ellie said through chattering teeth. "That's what they all say." The woman's smile never faltered. "So, we'll see if the floor wants to keep you, or drop you." She raised a hand. At her gesture, the ice around them began to split. Jagged cracks radiated outward from the fissure, glowing faintly with the same blue light that had lured Ellie here. The sound was deafening, sharp snaps and deep, resonant booms. Sections of the rink started to drift apart, each floating like a chunk of ice in black water. The shapes beneath stirred eagerly, their pale outlines darting between the gaps. "Make it to the far end," the woman said, "and you can go back up." "Fall," she glanced toward the dark water and chuckled. "They'll catch you." Peter stood at the edge of a nearby ice platform, watching without expression. Ellie's legs locked in panic. Go," the woman hissed. The piece of ice under Ellie's skates tilted suddenly, forcing her forward. She nearly lost her balance, but the skates seemed to grip the surface just enough to keep her upright. The next platform was only a few feet away, but the black water between was wide enough for the shapes beneath to wait in anticipation. She pushed off, landing with a hollow thud. The ice cracked under her weight, spiderwebbing outward, but held. The next jump was farther. Behind her, the woman's voice carried across the rink, "The cracks don't heal. Every mistake follows you." Ellie skated hard, her breath burning in her lungs. The reflection beneath her skated too, keeping pace. But it wasn't mimicking anymore, it was racing her. When she landed on the third platform, the ice immediately began to sink. Water surged up around her skates, freezing instantly and locking her wheels in place. From below, something pale rose toward her, fingers stretching, almost touching the ice. Ellie yanked at her skates, but the ice gripped them like cement. Cold burned up her calves, the kind of cold that didn't fade but dug deeper into bone. The pale fingers beneath the ice were close now, thin, jointed wrong, with nails that curled like fish hooks. She pounded her fists against the frozen surface, but it didn't crack. The thing below pressed both hands flat against the underside, its head following. The face that emerged made her stomach lurch, wet, swollen, with eyes bloated and white, mouth hanging open in a scream that released only a trail of bubbles. The ice beneath her gave a sharp pop. Water surged up through the cracks, soaking her socks inside the skates. The cold was a living thing now, snaking up her legs, threading itself into her muscles. "Move, little stray," the woman's voice carried over the groaning rink, sharp and mocking. "Or they'll keep you down there with them." Ellie slammed her palms down on the ice beside her skates, forcing her body weight to rock the slab. The platform tilted, the crack widening just enough for the frozen grip around her wheels to weaken. She wrenched one foot free, then the other, stumbling forward onto the still solid edge. The moment her weight shifted off it, the platform she'd been on plunged beneath the water. The pale hands vanished with it, and the black surface sealed over again, calm as glass. Ahead, 3 more ice platforms floated, each smaller than the last. The far end of the rink was shrouded in fog, but through it Ellie could see a faint vertical glow, like a hatch, maybe, or a door. She skated toward the next gap, forcing her body into the rhythm of pushing and gliding. The ice beneath her groaned with each stride, the cracks chasing her like lightning. She leapt for the next platform. This time her landing was sure, but the reflection beneath her matched it perfectly, except for one detail. It was smiling now, lips peeled back to show teeth too sharp and too many. It mouthed something to her. At first she thought it was her name. But then she realized it was saying switch. Ellie froze, staring down through the glassy surface. Her reflection tilted its head the wrong way, left when she leaned right, and the smile widened until it split the face in 2 jagged arcs. The mouth kept moving, forming the same word again and again, switch, switch. The air around her seemed heavier now, the sound of the crowd replaced by a low, steady hum, like someone dragging a bow across a single cello string. The fog ahead curled inward, closing her in. Not real, she muttered under her breath, crouching slightly as if bracing for the next jump. It's just water. It's just. Her reflection reached up. The fingertips pressed against the ice from below, matching hers perfectly when she put her hand down to test it. Only this time, the pressure pushed back. Hard. A shock of cold shot up her arm. She yanked her hand away, but the reflection's grip didn't let go. It dragged at her, skin stretching painfully against her bones. Her palm burned like frostbite, her knuckles going pale. Ellie let out a short, panicked cry and stomped hard with her skate's toe pick. The blade sliced a hairline crack between her and the thing beneath. Black water welled up, severing the contact. Her reflection distorted, twisting like a smear of oil. The woman's voice echoed again, closer now, as if she was circling just out of sight in the fog. Careful, dear, some of them want out more than you want in. Ellie shook her stinging hand, trying to keep her breathing steady. She crouched again, pushed off, and skated toward the second platform. It wobbled beneath her, tilting like a loose floorboard, but it held. She risked a glance down, this time the reflection was gone. Only the deep, dark rink stared back, still and endless. She didn't trust it. Not for a second. The final gap was just ahead, the smallest platform yet, and beyond it the glowing rectangle, definitely a doorway, stood waiting. The hum in the air rose in pitch, making her teeth ache. She bent low, ready to sprint for it, but the ice ahead quivered. From beneath, something pale and skeletal began to rise, lifting the platform from below like a grotesque offering. It wasn't her reflection this time. It was someone else entirely. And it was smiling too. The platform groaned under Ellie's skates, rocking as the shape pushed higher through the ice. Hair floated like strands of seaweed in slow motion, fanning out in the black water beneath. A forehead breached first, skin stretched tight over bone, then two milky eyes rolled upward until they fixed on her. The mouth opened. No sound came at first, just a rush of bubbles smearing across the underside of the ice. Then came the voice. Let me through. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't pleading. It was calm, measured, and certain, like the thing already knew she'd agree. Ellie's throat closed. She wanted to scream, but the sound caught somewhere in her chest. Her blade scratched nervously against the ice as she tried to keep her balance. I'm not, her voice cracked, barely audible over the rising hum in the air. I'm not here for you. The pale head tilted, water sloshing in the cavity of one cheek where flesh had given way. You are here for me. That's why they sent you. I don't even know who. The ice beneath her spiderwebbed with a sharp crack. A tendril, bone wrapped in shreds of skin, slid through one of the fractures and wrapped around her ankle. Cold bled instantly into her bones. Ellie dropped to her knees, clawing at the thing's grip. Get off, get off. The skeletal fingers tightened, and the voice filled her head now, bypassing her ears entirely. Switch. The word boomed inside her skull, shaking her thoughts loose. For a second, she saw it, her body standing on the platform, vacant-eyed, while she floated beneath the ice in the pale thing's place. She felt the crushing cold, the infinite dark, the weight of years pressing down. No. Ellie wrenched her foot sideways, blade scraping the ice. The sharp edge sliced into the thing's wrist, severing it clean. The hand fell away, still gripping her skate as it sank back into the water. The pale head stared at her for a moment longer before the darkness folded over it, sealing it away. Ellie's chest heaved, her lungs burning. She didn't look back, she just leapt for the final gap, skates clattering against the glowing doorway's threshold. On the other side, the fog was thicker than ever. But she could hear it now, music. A waltz, faint and slow, echoing through the mist like it was coming from another century. The moment Ellie's skates crossed the glowing threshold, the light behind her snuffed out like a candle in the wind. She froze, her breath puffing white in the damp air. The fog seemed to breathe around her, drawing in when she inhaled, exhaling when she did. The waltz played on, faint but steady. A violin glided over the melody, and a piano chimed in slow, deliberate keys. It felt impossibly far away and yet close enough to tickle her eardrums. She moved forward, her blades gliding over a perfectly smooth surface. This wasn't ice, at least, not normal ice. The floor glowed faintly from beneath, and with each push forward, shadows seemed to flit just under its surface like fish in a frozen lake. Shapes began to form in the fog ahead, tall figures swaying to the music. At first, she thought they were people skating, but as she drew nearer, she saw they weren't moving themselves. Their legs shuffled stiffly, heads tilted back as if caught mid-laugh, mouths open in soundless joy. Ellie's stomach twisted. One of the figures drifted close, its motion too smooth, too controlled. A man in a tuxedo, his skin as pale as candle wax, eyes shut tight. His hands were locked around an invisible partner's waist, his fingers frozen in place. She leaned in, and that's when she saw the frost running up his neck like veins, threading into his jaw. His breath puffed once, then stopped completely. She stumbled back, her skate clicking against the strange ice. The music swelled, and more figures emerged, women in dresses, children clutching stuffed animals, an old man in a trench coat, all moving in perfect, silent rhythm to the waltz. None of them were alive. From somewhere deeper in the mist, a voice called out, not the pale thing's voice, but something richer, smoother. "Ellie," it sang, as if her name were part of the music. "You made it in time for the final dance." The figures turned their heads in unison, every frozen face now locked on her. The fog split like curtains parting, revealing a stretch of glowing ice far wider than the rink had ever been in reality. At its center stood a man in a deep crimson tailcoat, his back straight, his hands poised like a maestro before an orchestra. His black hair was slicked back, and a silver mask covered the upper half of his face, the kind of thing worn at masquerade balls. In one hand, he held a long conductor's baton carved from ivory. In the other, a silver pocket watch dangled, swinging hypnotically. The waltz shifted, growing more complex, the instruments weaving tighter around each other. "You're late," the conductor said, his voice deep and honey-smooth, echoing across the rink as though the fog itself carried it. "But no matter. We still have time before the last note." Ellie's voice wavered. What is this place?" He tilted his head, smiling faintly under the mask. "This place is what lies beneath the rink, you know. It is older than the wood, older than the ice, older than your little town." He raised the baton, and the frozen dancers began to move faster, their faces locked in unnatural grins as they spun and twirled. "And tonight, you join them." "I'm not," she started, but the ice beneath her feet cracked, threads of pale light spilling out like veins. Her skates moved on their own, pulling her forward into the rhythm. "You hear it, don't you?" the conductor murmured. "The music in your bones?" She clenched her jaw, fighting the pull, but each note seemed to wrap tighter around her muscles. She caught glimpses under the ice now, not just shadows, but faces pressed against the frozen surface, their mouths open in silent screams. One set of eyes blinked slowly and looked right at her. They were Sarah's. Ellie's knees almost buckled. "Let her go." The conductor chuckled, the sound curling like smoke. "Let her go?" "My dear, she was the first to volunteer." He flicked his baton, and the dancers closed in. Ellie's skates dragged her into the whirling circle of dancers, their cold fingers brushing her arms, their glassy eyes locked forward. Each one moved in perfect time with the waltz, every step sharp and mechanical, as if controlled by invisible strings. The air smelled faintly of old perfume and something sour, like meat gone bad. The conductor's baton carved through the air, and the music swelled. Her legs jerked in time to the beat. Step, turn, glide. Step, turn, glide. No matter how hard she tried to fight, her body responded to the rhythm like it had always known it. One dancer's head snapped toward her, so fast she heard the vertebrae pop. The smile stayed fixed, but the eyes screamed. The woman's lips moved silently, forming a word over and over, "Help." Ellie twisted, trying to push away, but the man behind her seized her waist, forcing her into another spin. She crashed into a tall skater whose face was pale as bone and dusted with frost. His breath puffed white as he leaned in, whispering, "If you stop, you freeze." The warning made her heart slam against her ribs. She tried breaking her stride, but immediately a biting cold lanced up her legs, stiffening her knees. The ice beneath her feet seemed to cling, eager to swallow her whole. From the center, the conductor tilted his head like a disappointed teacher. "TSK. Your resistance spoils the tempo." Ellie gritted her teeth, forcing her thoughts above the music. She remembered something, her mom's voice from years ago, teaching her to hum over the rink's loudspeakers when she was scared during practice. It was stupid, but she tried it now. She hummed, low and steady, a sound that clashed with the waltz's perfect pitch. The ice trembled beneath her, and for just a moment, her left leg was her own again. The conductor's masked face turned sharply toward her. "What are you doing?" His tone was sharper now, the warmth gone. Ellie hummed louder. The music faltered. One of the dancers near her stumbled, their foot catching on the ice. A crack splintered under them, and an unearthly shriek echoed from below. The crack spread like lightning under the dancer's feet, jagged white lines veining out in all directions. The music faltered again, notes wobbling as the orchestra glanced nervously between their instruments and the fissures below. Ellie's hum grew stronger. The ice responded with a low groan, like something massive shifting deep beneath it. The dancers still moving tried to keep pace, but more of them stumbled, their rigid smiles trembling as panic broke through. From the largest crack, a black, slushy water began to bubble upward, spilling across the surface. It steamed in the cold air, and the steam carried a smell that made Ellie's stomach twist, like rotten seaweed and burnt hair. The conductor's baton froze midair. His head turned toward the fissure, and for the first time, Ellie saw uncertainty in his posture. "No," he muttered under his breath, "they're not ready yet." Something below scraped the underside of the ice, slow, deliberate strokes, like claws tracing the surface. Then came a deep, wet thud, so hard that several skaters fell to their knees. The ice under Ellie's feet shifted upward, and she stumbled forward, barely catching herself. The black water surged, and a pale, swollen hand punched through the crack, fingers impossibly long and tipped with sharp, curling nails. It flexed once, then gripped the ice, splitting it wider. The dancers nearest to it didn't scream. They didn't run. They simply turned their heads in unison, their eyes wide with a glazed, submissive awe. Ellie's instinct screamed to move, but she was trapped in a tightening ring of bodies. A man to her left leaned in, his voice barely a whisper, "Don't look into its face." The hand was followed by an arm, bloated and mottled with patches of frostbite. The orchestra's music stumbled, their bows trembling, horns squealing off-key. The conductor slammed his baton against the podium, desperate to regain control. "Keep the rhythm. Seal it." But the thing kept rising, pushing more ice aside. A second hand emerged, then the top of a head, hair streaming like wet weeds, face still submerged. Ellie's hum was shaking now, fear making her voice waver. She didn't know if she was waking something worse than the conductor, or breaking it free from him. The creature rose higher, shoulders breaking the ice apart in jagged chunks. Water poured over the rink, mixing with shattered crystal and blood from those who'd fallen. Its face finally surfaced, skin pale as milk, eyes black and unblinking, mouth far too wide, lined with teeth that curled inward like hooks. Ellie's breath caught. The man's warning echoed in her mind, "Don't look into its face." She forced her gaze to the floor, but still she could feel it staring, the cold sinking deeper into her bones. The conductor's voice thundered over the chaos. "Keep the music going. Don't let it take the stage." His baton moved frantically, stabbing through the air. The orchestra obeyed, their hands trembling as they tried to restore the melody, but the song was no longer the same, notes warped, becoming shrill, desperate, almost painful. The creature tilted its head toward the sound and let out a noise that wasn't a roar or a scream, but something in between, a grinding, underwater howl that rattled Ellie's teeth. The dancers began skating toward it in perfect formation, their movements now sharp and predatory. One by one, they leapt into the black water, vanishing beneath the surface without a ripple. Ellie's hum grew louder, uncontrollable. The cracks widened under her, forming a circle. She realized with horror that it wasn't random, the fissures were following the pattern of her song. The creature turned to her, ignoring the conductor entirely, and something in its gaze made her realize it wasn't breaking in. It was answering her. The conductor's voice broke in fury. "Stop. You'll undo it all." He leapt from the podium, baton raised like a blade. Ellie took one step back, then another, until her skates were at the edge of the largest hole. The creature's hand reached toward her, not to grab, but to offer. The rink around them was a chaos of falling bodies, shattered music, and freezing water. For a heartbeat, she thought of running. Then she took the hand. The cold hit her like a lightning strike, but it wasn't pain, it was relief. The creature pulled her into the water, the surface sealing behind them like glass. Above, she saw the conductor pound the ice in rage, his mouth forming words she could no longer hear. The music stopped. The lights dimmed. The rink was empty. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, the song began again,